Hello, we made it to the other side.
We did.
Yes. So while we wait for folks to join us today, let's go ahead and get started with a little icebreaker. So Pete, I'm curious to know, any big travel plans coming up this summer?
Yeah, I mean, so my 4-year-old actually has a hilarious birthday. He was born on the 4th of July,
So is my
right?
grandma.
Oh wow, there you go. So we always do kind of like a little trip action for him. We're gonna go to this ski hill, summer/ski hill called Mammoth, in
Heard of it.
yeah, exactly, and kind of like Central California, kind of on the in the Eastern Sierra, and uh, and he's now getting to the age where like the trick of like, look at these fireworks I put together for you, isn't really kind of like landing anymore,
Uh,
but it's landed for the last couple of years. So like we're gonna try that. It's kind of like believing in Santa Claus, but for people who are like born on the 4th of July.
I'll try that on my grandma this year. She's
Yeah,
turning,
exactly. Look what I put together for you.
yeah, she'll be 91, which is really awesome. So that's exciting.
Mhm.
Well, that's fun. Mammoth is beautiful. I was just there a couple weeks ago. Lots of water still. It's great. Okay, cool. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So hello,
Wonderful.
everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for Data or Die, Get Your Reps Ramped at Warp Speed. Before we begin, today's event is hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and the related supporting disciplines. Our mission is to create an environment for our 25,000 and growing members to answer questions they'd struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners they may not know about. No need to reinvent the wheel by yourself. We gotcha. We do that through great live sessions like the one you're about to experience today, through our robust online forum and in-person events. And those of you who weren't previously admitted should now have access to the community. If you don't hesitate to drop a note to our team via modernsaleshq.com. And if you like the content that you see today, you'll love our 3-day Revenue Excellence Summit happening July 12th through the 14th. We've pulled together 16 events of amazing content and speakers. Hear from the CEO of Zoom Info and SalesLoft, as well as sales leaders at HubSpot, Dually Outreach, Atrium, and Zong, and more. And Gong, and more. And here's the link to sign up. You won't want to miss the event of the year. And now we're going to quickly go over some housekeeping rules. I know we're all excited to dive in, but first let's go over these rules. So if you have a question for Pete, please use the Q&A and the chat function as well, and we'll be sure to get them during the event. Yes, this event is being recorded. You'll be able to access this recording along with the key takeaways on the previous events page of the MSP website. So please don't be shy and use that chat button. Pete is a great wealth of knowledge, so reach out. And now to our sponsor. Our founder of MSP and parent company Atrium is sponsoring this event today. So I'm going to go ahead and let Pete introduce Atrium himself and run the show from here. And I'll be back on for a few closing notes at the end. Take it away, Pete.
Nice. Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Roxy. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen over here. Oh, there's that sad fiddly fig that you guys were making fun of earlier. My my weak fig plant. All right, let's go ahead and share this here. Yeah, cool. So, hey guys, I'm Pete Kazanjy. We'll talk a little bit about me in a second here, but really excited to talk about data-driven ramping. A lot of organizations have a lot of staff that are in ramp right now, and and it's extremely important to make sure that folks are having success. So in addition to being one of the founders of Modern Sales Pros, I'm also the founder of Atrium. So just kind of a short thing for folks. Atrium makes what we call data-driven sales management software. So it exists to help AE, SDR, AM, CSM managers use data to improve team performance. And so the way that it does that is by continuously monitoring dozens and dozens of AE, SDR, AM, CSM metrics and proactively alerting managers, leadership, staff when something is off for their reps, teams, etc. And so what this means is that managers can get to coaching insights faster about their reps, drive positive behavior change, and win. And the coolest thing about all of this is that it only takes 2 minutes to set up just by connecting your Salesforce account via read-only OAuth connection there. So that's kind of like the elevator pitch on Atrium. A little bit about me. Like I noted, I'm one of the founders of Atrium. This is actually my second software startup. My previous company was a company called TalentBin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And that's like really where I kind of got introduced to modern sales, was when I was the founders of TalentBin, but then became our first account executive because like, oh man, someone's got to sell this stuff, right? First AE, first sales manager, first sales leader, eventually acquired by Monster Worldwide. And then kind of subsequent to that, ended up writing a book on sales, on startup sales called Founding Sales. And then ultimately started Atrium and Modern Sales Pros, largely just to kind of like, push forward the craft of sales, push forward the craft of modern sales, because it's something I think quite a bit about. Some of my kind of favorite resources for ramping stuff are some of these assets right here. I think we actually are going to drop a sign up link, like if you want to get a copy of all of these books, and then also a coffees for closers Yeti mug here. You can just go ahead and sign up for that via that link. All we ask for in return is a quick disco chat with one of our account executives here. But I really love these books. 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach is by my buddy Corey Bray and Hillman Sor. It's absolutely fantastic. It's written as a novel, so it's like kind of funny. It's like it's total page turner. It's crazy. Crushing Quota is a little bit more academic. It's by Michelle Vazana. She's super amazing. She was also the co-author of Cracking the Sales Management Code. This one is all about sales management, whereas Cracking the Sales Management Code is more about like sales metrics. And then of course, The Qualified Sales Leader by John Mcmahon. We actually had a fireside chat with John Mcmahon. Gosh, it was a couple of weeks ago. It was absolutely fantastic. He's the former CRO of Parametric Technology Corporation. He's on the board at Snowflake. He's just, kind of the OG, the OG's OG of amazing sales leader. He's been a 5-time CRO at multiple public companies. So can't recommend these books enough. If you guys want to get a copy, go ahead and hit that link. And you can just sign up for it there. We'll get those out. Wonderful. So talking about ramps today, right? Ramping of AEs, ramping of SDRs, and some of the topics that we're going to talk about here are, what is an example of a bad ramp versus a good ramp? What are some of the pathologies that lead to ramping failing? And kind of a mechanism that we're going to use to frame that for people is what we call the new ramp productivity offset, which is kind of like the root of all evil, kind of the crux of why people kind of struggle at instrumenting ramp for reps. And we'll talk about how to do it, effectively there. What we're not going to talk about is onboarding content or kind of training or things like that. What we're going to be talking about is like using data to monitor and manage the successful ramp of your sales reps. I'm chuckling right now because literally I was like realizing that I was having a Twitter direct message conversation with one of our customers earlier today, who was asking about a rep who was struggling in ramp, kind of due to low activity, and we were having a back and forth on that. I was like, man, I was literally doing this morning, and now I'm doing it right now as well. Wonderful. So some of the ways that you can kind of think about like doing effective ramps versus ineffective ramps. A lot of times folks think about ramping and onboarding as being only an enablement thing. Like, hey, we're teaching you stuff, right? We're teaching you stuff. That's important, but what you need to also make sure of is that the outcomes from that teachingness is being implemented and like in a way that's measurable, so you actually know that things are happening, right? And if you do these things poorly, it drives to low rep retention and kind of the associated costs with that, because a busted ramp is really quite costly, because you're paying salary expense, you're paying base salary, maybe you're even paying a draw, and you're paying that, and then you never get that back in the form of revenue in month 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is why it's so this is why effective ramping is so important, is because you're doing, not only did you have the entire hiring cost associated with someone and all the like interviewing and what have you, but you're also investing in the rep from a sale or from a salary expense standpoint, with the intention of getting that revenue back in, month 3, month 4, month 5, month 6, month 7, etc. And so if you never get to that because you didn't get them to success, you actually never get the you never get the benefit back. So what is this look like effectively? Well, what you want to do is you want to get people trained up quickly, but importantly, you want to get, and we're talking about account executives here, but the equivalent is true with SDRs. You want to have them having early at bats kind of quickly, like as soon as they have the ability to, I'll talk about how we do it at Atrium. We actually atomize our onboarding and training such that reps they get certified on each part, but as soon as they're certified on the first thing that they would have to do in a sales process, they're now enabled to do that. So we have disco certification, and then pitch demo training, and then mid funnel and kind of closing training. As soon as they are certified with respect to discovery, as soon as they're disco certified, they're hooked up to the op queues, and they're able to prospect their assigned accounts, etc., because they're able to get in there. And then the reason why that's important is because you want them to start having those early at bats as quick as possible, not just because those then will turn into deals later on, but also there's nothing better than kind of live activity there to kind of knock the cobwebs out there. And so what that all kind of does is that drives better outcomes over the long term. You have reps who are more stoked, right? Because they're seeing progress, they're having at bats, and then just everybody's happy, right? And I think this is just kind of a general sales thing. The more you can bias to action, the better off you are. Cool. Cool. So let's talk about why ramping is kind of tough. Or instrumenting ramping is tough. And really what it comes down to is what we call the new rep ramp productivity offset. And so we have this handy dandy visualization that we made here that I'm going to walk kind of through here. So at the bottom here, we've got time, right? This is the x-axis. And this is the new rep hire date right here. And so what ends up happening is there's a substantial offset from that hire date to when you would expect deals to start showing up, and then moreover for folks to get to full productivity with respect to quota attainment or what have you, or they would have the potential ability to be at full quota productivity. And so there's essentially a couple stages here. There's the time during which you're training, and depending on the complexity of your product, maybe that if it's a very simple sell, maybe that might be a week, or maybe that might be 2 weeks. If it's a more complicated thing, maybe that's a month or two. If it's a month or two, probably what you my claim would be to you that you could probably break that apart into some sort of kind of atomize that the way that we were describing earlier. So people can start getting early at bats earlier, but you're going to have a training period. Then what ends up happening is you have this period of pipe building, right? So where reps are starting to take ops. They're either prospecting themselves, they're hooked up to inbound, etc. And so what you would expect is that depending on your deal cycle, it would be highly unlikely that you would anticipate having a deal show up during this deal cycle, because if deals take 60 days or they take 90 days or they take 120 days, kind of contingent on your general sales cycle, during this period, you're not going to really see those outputs. It would be you might get an occasional bluebird, a win here or there, but it's probably less likely. And a good rule of thumb is that you're not going to start seeing good productivity until at least 2 deal cycles in. That's a rule of thumb there, which can be really tough if you have a longer deal cycle. So then we have this section here that I kind of called the partial productivity period here. And so what this is after somebody's closed their first deal, and they're at the point where they have they're closing deals here or there, but they're not at full productivity because like the pipe they were building earlier on was falling out because they weren't doing a good job at it, because they were ramping, because they were newbies, et cetera. And so you've got this time of like partial productivity here, where it's really hard to kind of like make a judgment about how they're doing. And then we get over here to like, full productivity, where it's like, okay, cool, we're now at the point where somebody's producing, they're hitting quota, or they're like bouncing around at quota, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Cool. So this is kind of like our big, like this, and the reality here is that because these are time offsets, if you're not paying attention to leading indicators throughout this, it creates a very tough situation for making judgments as to whether or not a rep is going to have success. And so what our claim is that the way you ought to do this is what we call data-driven ramp management, and you should be paying attention to those leading indicators and if you pay attention to those leading indicators, you're going to have a lot more success getting ahead of potential issues, but also just having more confidence that reps are ramp, as compared to just like holding your breath and like waiting until you get to full productivity here, right? And so just to kind of like show you how that plays out in practice here, I'm going to kind of show you kind of the challenges associated with some of these other ways that organizations sometimes define productivity. So one way an organization might certify ramp is they would say, hey, I'm going to wait until a rep gets to full productivity, right? So like we're going to withhold judgment until a rep is at full productivity. And so like that's the way that we measure the success of a rep in ramp. So the challenge with that, of course, is like, as we discussed previously, there's this huge time offset right here where you're kind of like holding your breath, waiting to see whether or not this rep is going to get to full productivity. And so I'm going to kind of show you some examples of like how that can potentially be problematic there. So like, let's use this right here. So this is like a hypothetical example here where you got this rep. We're going to call him Max here. And so what you can kind of see is that like, he's closing some bookings here. He's maybe a little bit lagged with respect to ramp. But if what you're waiting for is like full productivity here, and like looks like his peers kind of get to full productivity right around like month 6 or month 7. And so the challenge here, and this is like Murphy's law of like ramping reps, is that in general, like, it's not that someone's just going to be like flatlined, like they're not closing any business whatsoever. Instead, what'll happen is they're kind of like, bumping around here, making sure that like that they're actually closing a couple deals here or there. And so this can be very tough for a manager or a leader of sales operations to say like, hey, you know what, I'm not sure if this person is like going to get to success here. But I don't want to like pull the ripcord and say like, hey, you know what, this isn't working out, I'm going to offboard you, because they keep closing deals. And so this is why it's really important to kind of pay attention to the more leading indicators, right? Leading indicators ahead of bookings. And so like an example of this would be like opportunity ownership. So in this case, what we can see is that actually Max doesn't really have a problem of opportunity ownership, right? So this would indicate to me as a manager, like it's not that he's not being fed. If he had low opportunity ownership, well, like that wouldn't be surprising, right? And so what this allows us to do is kind of isolate that, that this isn't the problem here. But then if we look at another metric, like meetings on calendar, if somebody is, if somebody has a bunch of opportunities in their pipe, they're not actually having customer facing meetings with them, well, that's a problem, right? And so the kind of the as we like to joke here at Atrium, like customer facing meetings is kind of like the fundamental unit of like selling behavior, if you will, for whether we're talking about AEs or like AMCSMs or what have you. And so pretty clearly what you can see here with Max is that he's not getting into band with the rest of these reps here. And so this is why, as an example, like waiting for someone to get to full productivity is potentially really problematic, because in this example right here, we should have been able to see in like month 2 or month 3, like, whoa, okay, pump the brakes, there's something going on here, what's going on, etc., and then intervene. And right, this is one of the things that we talk about at Atrium, is like the important thing is like you want to intervene before an issue becomes a problem. Like we want to catch an issue early on, like, whoa, hey, we're in month 2 here, and like he's at like 50% of the normal customer facing meeting volume of the other reps who ramped before him. Like, ooh, that's like really concerning there. And so as a manager, we'd want to be aware of that and intervene in order to kind of help lift this up, and remediate that, right? Rather than, of course, like waiting and kind of like hoping against hope that the person's going to get to success there. So this is the and so that's kind of like the problem associated with what we call like full rep productivity certification, right? Like maybe we should call it like waiting to exhale, right? Holding your breath, hoping against hope that someone's gonna get there, as opposed to like being here in the leading indicators and understanding what's going on there. Cool. All right. Well, another way that organizations oftentimes will try to skin this cat, is they'll do kind of like first deal based cert, right? So like as soon as somebody, certs on a first deal, they're like, all right, cool, you're off to the races. Have fun, kids. Like you're good to go. The problem with this is that, again, like, not only is there a lag there from a time offset standpoint, and again, this depending on how long your time offset is, or how long your deal cycle is, it could be something that's, this could be 120 days, it could be 180 days, it could be 190 days, etc. And then moreover, even if that's not the case, like let's say you have your like a B2B SaaS company, say, and like you got a 60-day sales cycle or a 75-day sales cycle or whatever, it's like pretty crispy. You still, if you declare victory after that first deal, well, it's not necessarily guaranteed that that person's going to get to success, right? Like if you're only certifying on that. And so I'll kind of give you an example of, so not only is the problem that time offset that we kind of talked about, like the time offset isn't nearly as bad as like full productivity ramp, but it's different. It's like differently problematic. Cool. So let's kind of give you some examples of what this looks like, or what how this can be problematic. So in this case, what you can kind of see is like we've got this rep, her name's Jane here, and so we can kind of see that she came hot out of the gate, right? She's got a deal here in month 3. None of the other reps have closed the deal. So if we, not only did she close a deal, she closed 2 deals, and so if we thought, like if we were basing this just based on, if we were basing our rep success just purely predicated on early deals, we might declare victory and be on our merry way here. The problem is, like, this is actually what happened after her quick start, where her wins drop back down again, and she's low in month 5, month 6, month 7. She starts looking more like Max over here. And so this would be the challenge. Like if we declared victory at month 3 and we're like, yeah, this person's great, we're I'm going to pay attention to other reps, etc. Then you'd be bummed here, right? You'd be bummed, and then moreover, and like there's a variety of reasons why this can happen. Like I remember an early Atrium customer had a similar situation here, where there's all manner of reasons why a rep can have like an early success, like can have an early deal success. It could be that it's just like a nice bluebird deal that kind of comes inbound, person's ready to buy. It could be transferred pipe from another rep, right? That's actually a pretty common thing. It could be a situation where the manager was the one who kind of like closed the deal, right? Like was doing a lot of the selling on their behalf. And so like there's a variety of reasons why declaring victory after the first couple of deals can be really fraught there. Cool. So what would be the better way to do this? Well, just kind of like with the Max thing earlier on, we would look at those leading indicators, and so the way to do that would be, like in this case, if we looked at Jane here, we can see that her customer facing meeting volume is kind of coming into band with other folks, like not surprising. And then she kind of closed that, but then she never really gets the full productivity with respect to kind of customer facing meeting volume here. And so this would indicate to us, like if she's not going to get to full productivity with respect to those leading indicators, it's going to be really tough for her to get to full productivity with respect to those lagging indicators here, like the wins, right? And then we could even get like more kind of like more granular with respect to this. So like this is actually this is like a special Atrium KPI where that we call stage reach. Essentially what it does is it allows you to measure the number of stages that have elapsed, right, have then progressed by a rep. And whether it's a special stage like how many ops got to disco, or how many ops got to proposal, or how many ops got to contract out. In this case, this is just an aggregation of all stages that have been advanced as just like stage momentum. Um, and really what you can kind of see here is that she comes hot out of the gate there, which is not surprising because that drove that initial transaction, or the initial couple transactions. And then the number of stage advancements starts kind of like trailing off there. Right. And so like this would be another example of like why it's problematic to declare victory, to do first deal based certification and kind of like declare victory there and kind of move on. Right. So the right way of doing this is what we like to call data-driven ramp management, and kind of what this looks like in practice would be paying attention to how things are going, not here, but here. Right. So paying attention to these leading indicators here, knowing that if the leading indicators are pointed in the right direction, and you're not just looking at one leading indicator, but like a number of leading indicators, and like all things are looking green, that we know that those first deals are going to happen. We know that we're going to get to full productivity later on. And so I'm going to kind of take you through what this looks like in practice here. So wonderful. So a good example here, like this is like a very healthy, like this is what you would want to see. You would want to see a ramp where a new rep, let's say that like Norma here, is ramping into band along with Louise and David, right? Like their customer facing meeting volume is coming into band here. It's looking successful, but it's not just like activity, right? Because activity, while important, you actually want to you want to make sure that it's actually turning into opportunities, or the activity is going against opportunities versus activity for activity's sake. And then moreover, what we want to do is we want to make sure that those opportunities are progressing in a way that's meaningful. And so in this case, what we can see is like not only is there customer facing meeting volume that's happening, there's also good opportunity ownership happening here. And then moreover, if we look at, are those opportunities that are in pipe here, are they advancing, right? Because you can see a situation where somebody, and actually this was the example, gosh, it's so funny, small world. Like the example that I was talking with this customer this morning, via Twitter direct message. That's how we do support here. So the founder just like answers Twitter direct messages and LinkedIn messages or anything. Just kidding. We have an amazing customer success team, but I happen to know this sales leader pretty well. And so you can have a situation where somebody can have lots of opportunities, right? Like maybe they're hooked up to the queues, et cetera. But if they're not advancing, right? If they're not moving along, if they're not going from stage 0 to discovery to solutions design to proposal to contract, to paper process, well, that's a problem, right? Like you can have opportunities that are in pipe, and if they're not advancing, right? If you're not paying attention to those stage advancements, that's a huge problem. And then moreover, not paying attention to like the stage advances at those different stages, because like you can get tripped up by that by saying, hey, this person's having lots of customer facing meetings and they have a bunch of ops that are being owned. Oopsie, nothing's moving through the pipe, right? That would indicate to us that we have a problem where the rep is like struggling to advance deals to the next stage. This is a pretty common promoted SDR pathology, where you have SDRs who are promoted and like they're good at activity, they're good at prospecting, but they struggle with like setting the next step and holding people professionally accountable to that. And so this is why in this case right here, what we can see is that Norma Jean here looks fantastic, right? Like she's got a bunch of ops that are in pipe, she's got a bunch of customer facing meetings that happen, and then moreover, the ops are progressing, right? They're moving through the stages, et cetera. And then like unsurprisingly, lo and behold, the bookings come, right? And so one of my favorite books is by Bill Walsh, the coach of the San Francisco 49ers, and also he was the coach of the Stanford football team before that. And it's called The Score Takes Care of Itself. As you can kind of see that happening here, right? So the whole premise of the book is, you really can't worry about the lagging outcomes like the score. Like as a football player, like you can't worry about the score. All you can care about is gaining 4 yards on this play. Or if you're one of the linebackers, all you can worry about is getting the quarterback, or like doing your job. And so you can kind of see that happening here, because if you do your job quite well and everyone does their job, then the outcomes will happen. Right, the outcomes will come. And so you can kind of see that happening here, where with good inputs like customer facing meeting volume plus good opportunity ownership plus good stage advancements, then guess what? Like the bookings are gonna come. In contrast, you can have good opportunity ownership. Like, where's the example here? You can have good opportunity ownership, like our buddy Max Power here, right? But if your other leading indicators aren't where they need to be, the score won't take care of itself, like this. And the same is true with this example right here with Jane here, right? We don't have the example of like opportunity ownership here, but like let's presume that her opportunity ownership looked similar to Max's here. You say like, oh man, like here's Jane, she's taking care of business, her opportunity ownership is ramping. No, not actually, right? Her customer facing meeting volume isn't there, and then her stage advancements aren't there. And so this is why it's really important for us to pay attention to all number of these leading indicators, like all of them together, because if you don't have all of them working in harmony, you're not going to have these outcomes right here, right? And so a little bit of like this is why it's really important to pay attention to these things. Now it's not super easy, but there are things that make it easier. One thing is a good operating rhythm. Another thing you can use is you can use purpose-made software, and this is literally what Atrium does, right? So one of the things that Atrium helps with is, like, one of the key use cases for Atrium is instrumenting the healthy ramp or unhealthy, right? Because like we want to know about both, of your reps. And you kind of see here, these are some examples of like alerts happening in Atrium, indicating that a rep is light with respect to, in this case, the number of accounts they're interacting with, or number of customer facing meetings. And so when we think about what it is that a modern sales manager ought to be doing with data to help their team, it's a number of different things. Deal inspection. Yeah, most AE managers don't need help with deal inspection. Like they come from AE land, and they know that they're supposed to do that. Database one-on-ones, tracking goals. We have another master class on managing with goals. But monitoring this new higher ramp is extremely important, kind of like one of the core behaviors that managers ought to be doing, because it's extremely important time in the growth of that rep. And so what our claim would be is that managers deserve a purpose-made solution that helps them do that. Atrium is an example of that has every KPI that SDR, AE, AM, CSM teams need. It does have proactive goal tracking. And then importantly, it tracks and monitors all these KPIs in order to help us understand, like, hey, there's an issue over here. I think you should check it out. And one genre of that is ramping. Right? Like, hey, this person right here looks like their ramp is off. And the reason why is because their opportunity ownership as compared to their other peers at the same time in ramp seems like it's off. Like that's a really important thing that managers should be paying attention to. And so it's helpful to have like a little metrics robot kind of paying that attention to that for you in order to let you know that that's happening. And so in short, what we do is we help sales managers use data to improve team performance. One example of that would be in ramp, where we work with hundreds and hundreds of customers in order to do that. And anyway, so like the point is, like, we like to do sales math. One really important way of doing sales math is in ramp. And so let's talk a little bit more about ramp here. So how would we be paying attention to? So these are the examples of like why this can be problematic, and we kind of used some, and then moreover how to do it right. Then but only a couple of different metrics that we talked about. But there's a number of others as well. And we kind of used the AE ones as kind of the key example there. But you can do this for all manner of roles. So we just did account executives here, and so some of the things that you might want to be paying attention to there would be things like opportunity ownership. Customer-facing meeting volume is another one. Another one that's like really helpful that we didn't talk about above is new opportunity ownership. Like how many new ops are coming into a rep's pipe? Because like obviously if you're only like new ops coming in feeds the total amount of opportunity ownership. So bird dogging that ends up being pretty important there. Obviously we I think not listed here, we talked about stage advancements as well. Kind of key stage advancements can be a really important thing as well. But you can do the same thing in SDR land as well. Like SDR should be ramping more quickly than account executives, largely because there's like not as much of a time offset between when they start engaging accounts and when they start turning into like customer facing meetings or opportunities or what have you. And so like the things to pay attention to there would be things like the number of accounts that are being interacted with, the number of unique contacts that are being interacted with, because again, like you could be engaging with a bunch of accounts, but you could only be single threaded in there. So we actually want to be engaging with lots of contacts. Are they actually doing the work that is required? So the email volume, et cetera. And then of course we do want to look at the lagging indicators as well, right? Just to make sure that we are getting those outputs, right? Because if you have inputs without outputs, that tells you that there's probably like an efficiency or quality thing. So we have to pay attention to both, right? And so for SDRs, this can be opportunity creation, meeting creation, maybe pipe creation, maybe even bookings sourced. But like problem with that is that that's going to be like a lag on a lag, right? So like they create the opportunity and then the AE has to run the op. And then that eventually turns into bookings. But the point is that you can do this, right? Like by paying attention to these leading indicators and these lagging indicators, you can make sure that the ramps are looking more like this right here, as opposed to looking like this right here. How do you do this in practice, or how do you make sure it's happening? Well, one thing that's really important is making sure that you have this data available to you in order to be able to come back to it, look at it, see what's going on, and then intervene as appropriately. So a couple of different ways that organizations will do this. One is kind of like standard CRM reporting, Salesforce reporting, HubSpot reporting, dashboards, et cetera. The challenge with that is like you have to build it, and then also it doesn't really, like, none of those have the ability to visualize in a ramping capacity. And then moreover, you have to come back and look at it on a recurring basis. Like if you use your eyeballs as the mechanism by which to detect those issues. Kind of a more advanced version of this would be like business intelligence, like Looker or Tableau or what have you. It's kind of like the same situation as CRM reporting, just like a more kind of like a fussier version thereof. But again, very powerful. The challenge, of course, is that you got to like use your eyeballs to go in and look at it. And then lastly, a way that organizations solve this is with what we call data-driven sales management software, kind of like Atrium. The nice thing about these sort of things is they're super quick to set up. Like in Atrium's case, it takes about 2 minutes to like turn on an Atrium account. The downside is a little bit less flexible than like business intelligence or kind of like reporting, like business intelligence or CRM reporting. But you get all the things kind of built out of the box, but you can't ask like any specialized, like any crazy question you want. It's more like these are the couple hundred questions that generally you want to be able to answer, which of course is like, given the fact that most organizations are going to be able to like measure their ramp in very similar ways, that ends up being sufficient. The other benefit associated with dedicated software in this regard is that it's automatically monitored in the ways that we were kind of talking about above, where it can be the statistics can be or the metrics can be statistically monitored in order to say, hey, this person's behind in ramp, this person's ahead in ramp. Cool. And so then it's one thing to have the assets that are available to you as a manager or as a leader. The next thing that you really need to make sure of is that people are actually consuming these. And a great way of doing that is making sure that it's woven through a brisk operating rhythm. And so like this is some examples of how you might set up an operating rhythm. Usually like a good way of having an operating rhythm is to have like a set of meetings that are happening that have a specific agenda, where the agendas are like mutually exclusive. Like in this meeting, we do these things right here with these, with these metrics asset. In this meeting right here, we did this different thing from this meeting with a different set of metrics assets and what have you. So some examples of these might be, a pipeline review meeting, a one-on-one is a really great place to be looking at metrics in ramp, right? Because we're not in our one-on-one, we're not talking about like deals, but instead we're looking at like metrics and saying, hey, do you have enough opportunities? Are you coming into band, right? How are our advancements looking? Things like that. So as an example, if we were the manager of Jane here, in our one-on-one in month 3 here, right? Or I don't know, that would be like our 6-week one-on-one or our 8-week one-on-one or what have you. This would have been the place where we would have said, interesting. Let's talk about this, right? And so by making sure that those assets are available in order to be in that, be in that operating rhythm meeting, that's where you catch those issues. What's going on here? Let's go ahead and fix this. And so another masterclass that I do is on data-driven coaching and kind of like how to take that aha and then fix it, because that's what we want to do, right? We want to catch it and then not just be like, okay, great. It's like, we want to catch it and we want to fix it, right? We want to act to change the rep behavior in order to improve the outcome. Because we don't you wouldn't be a very viable manager if you observed that a rep was having a problem in ramp and you're like, all right, great, I guess we should fire you, right? Like, no, there's probably something going on there. And then we would want to get ahead of that because we probably hired them for a reason, right? Then they passed our recruiting process for a reason. And so this is the place where those things are detected, and then we can intervene in order to drive outcomes. And so data-driven coaching, that data-driven coaching masterclass is an example is a kind of a place to kind of check out more in depth how to do that in practice there. Cool. And so then lastly, what we're going to talk about is like, okay, well, like, how do you get good at detecting these things, right? Like, how do you systematize the orientation and kind of like decision making based on this? And so in short, what you have to do is like get good at reading and actioning the data. And so there's kind of a loop there. Like, one, you want to detect the potential issues, right? So we have the assets that are available to us. They're woven into our operating rhythm right here. But then what we're going to do is we're going to detect those issues either using our eyeballs or alternatively using software that like does this detection for us. We're then going to diagnose what's going on. We're going to say, hey, what is the root cause of this? And then we're going to communicate, prescribe a next action to potentially remediate that. And so I'll kind of give you an example of like what this might look like in practice here. So in this case, what we can see is like, we have an issue where it seems that like Jane here has a stage reached issue. It looks like her opportunities are not progressing in the way that we would want them to. Okay, well, that seems like it's potentially an area of concern there. So then what would we then go and look for to see what else is going on there? And so in this case, we actually have these like what we call like metrics driver tree cards here. So you can see SDR rep or SDR metrics tree, AE metrics tree right here. But in general, what we want to do is go right? So in this case, stage advancements are kind of like over here as a leading indicator there. And so the other things that might be driving issues associated with stage advancements might be things like, hey, what is our conversion rate looking like at those various stages? Are things dropping out of the pipe at certain points? Is the rep doing enough customer facing meeting behavior? Like, just the quantity of their behavior. Are they meeting with those opportunities? Do they have enough ops that are in their name in order for them to? And so like what we would do is we'd see an issue like this, and then what you want to be able to do is like go and investigate those other doors and say like, oh, okay, their stage advancements are problematic. Do they have enough ops? Just flip over to ops. Oh, their ops are fine. Okay, that's weird. Okay, well, are they meeting with those ops, right? Are they engaging them? You flip over to meetings. Ooh, that's the problem right there. And I think that's actually the example up here would be like, oh, okay, like, to mix these examples together. We have a stage advancement problems. That's interesting. Does the rep have enough ops? He does have enough ops. That's weird. What about like, customer facing meeting behavior? Uh-oh, I think I know what the issue is here, right? And so then now, because we've done that diagnosis, we can then intervene. It's like, hey, Jane or Max or whoever the example was in this case, hey, I'm observing this thing right here. What do you think's going on here? Like, what's happening here? And then we can get ahead of that from an output standpoint. And so if you do all those things successfully, what you will have is you will have way healthier you will have way healthier ramping behavior on your reps, which is extremely important. This is something we see with our customers all the time is, once they go from kind of like an old school way of doing ramp instrumentation to a more modern data driven approach, well, what ends up happening is like they see those ramps compress, because like they're able to very quickly be like, uh-oh, so-and-so doesn't have enough ops, let's load them up more. Or uh-oh, somebody doesn't have, their meeting volume, they're fine on ops, but their meeting volume is off. Okay, let's intervene there and see what's going on, and then be able to tackle that. And so a couple of great things kind of happen out of this. Like, one, people get ahead of things much faster. They're able to like intervene and help remediate any sort of problems. Two, if somebody is not going to get there, rather than like hoping against hope and saying like, let's give them a couple more months, let's get to month 6, 7, 8, 9. It's like, look, we have enough data here. Like we tried to intervene. We've had a bunch of coaching conversations. We've worked with them on the various issues at hand. And so this is just like, it's time to part ways. And that's actually a really important thing, right? So it's important for the organization, it's important for the rep as well. If they're at the point where they're outside the point at which they should be at full productivity, and then moreover the leading indicators are problematic, right? And so it's like clearly not bad luck, right? The leading indicators are looking problematic, and the quality metrics are looking problematic, and there's been coaching and management that's been taking place. Well, that's a bad hire. And so rather than like throwing away salary expense month after month after month, and then moreover, not just throwing away salary expense, but also like they're working other people's ops essentially. Like all those ops that they're not closing could be going to other account executives, and they could be having more success with that. So calling a spade there and being on your way is an important thing to do there. Cool. So that's pretty much all that I wanted to cover here today. I think there have been some questions kind of like popping off over here in the corner. I've been kind of observing that in my out of the corner of my eye. But if folks, these are my my current favorite sales management books right now. If folks want a copy of any of these, all of these books, and also a Coffees for Closer Yeti mug, go ahead and just sign up there for that, and we'll get that out to you after you have a chat with our team. Let me go ahead and go over here. So I think, okay, so Kenny Lim has a question here. A lot of these examples inherently leads us to the idea of more activity, full productivity equals good, and Jane is the problem, but our data shows, sorry, it just jumped around. Wow, it just jumped down for some reason. Our data shows that our top performers are not necessarily top activity, sometimes in the bottom thirds. How would you orient yourself around that? That's really surprising to me. I mean, we have like 300 customers, and that's like largely never the case. So my hunch there would be, if you have top performers who are not at like full productivity with respect to customer facing meeting volumes, that probably indicates that their quotas are too low. Like if you can get to full productivity with like 10 customer facing meetings a week, well, that kind of tells me that you could probably get to 150% or 200% at like with like a meaningful amount of volume there. Cool. So let me see here. Oh yeah, Hannah had a note here. Motor activity does equal good. I mean, in general, it's always the case. Like, sales is not complicated. It's just the output of sales is literally just a high quantity of high quality behavior. And so generally speaking, when organizations are like, hey, we don't want to measure like inputs and things like that, usually what the root cause is there is people who are afraid of actually managing by metric. And so the reality is like that's more kind of like rooted in like, you know, mindsets of the past. And it's kind of like I don't know if folks have ever seen like Moneyball with Brad Pitt. Usually what that is that's people like, it's like the old scouts who are like, I don't know, I've got a feel, this person's got it going on, right? As opposed to like, no, I'm actually like measuring what's happening here.
The data doesn't
Wonderful.
lie.
Yeah,
So
there you go. Wonderful. So I think that's pretty much it. Let me go ahead and pop over to Q&A here. Wonderful. Yeah, so delightful. Well, let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Thank you everybody for taking the time to hang out with us today. And I think Roxy, you're gonna take us home. Tell everybody about the summit and what have you.
yeah, just a few quick words and we'll let everybody be on their way. Thank you so much, Pete, for that. Always great to hear from you. Thank you for that informative session on Data or Die, Get Your Reps Ramped at Warp Speed. Thank you so much for everyone for attending today's session and for keeping the chat lively. We do appreciate that. To learn more about Atrium, make sure y'all head over to atriumhq.com. As a reminder, the recordings and key takeaways will be available on the MSP website shortly after that. Don't forget to check out our upcoming events like our awesome 3-day Revenue Excellence Summit. It'll be happening in a couple weeks, starting on July 12th through the 14th. Make sure y'all sign up and I'll see you guys there. Pete, I'll see you backstage.
Okay, later.